This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.
Potters, are you looking for high-quality equipment and supplies? Since 1974, Bailey Pottery Equipment, based in Kingston, New York, has produced equipment used in schools, universities, and art centers nationwide. Their gas kilns, renowned for ease of use, fuel efficiency, and beautiful results, are a global favorite. Bailey Pottery Equipment caters to all skill levels, offering a range of equipment and top brand ceramic supplies at discounted prices, all backed by their outstanding personal service. Visit BaileyPottery.com, the professional's choice for all things clay.
Hey folks, Sunshine Cobb here, ceramic artist and current resident coordinator at the Bray. I'm excited to announce that our application portal is now open for our 2025 residency cohort. Applications are due by December 19th, 2024. For details on all our residencies available, head to archibray.org/residencies. Please help us spread the word about this amazing new opportunity at the Bray. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Kookie Kane, and welcome to the For Flux Sake podcast. I'm coming to you from the Harvard Ceramics program in our fair city, Allston, Massachusetts. I'm here with Rose and Matt Katz of the world-famous Ceramic Materials Workshop, and they are ready to answer your burning questions about clay and glaze. Hello, Matt and Rose.
Hi, Kathy.
Hello, Kathy.
What's happening?
Well, big world keeps on turning, you know.
Really? Really? Okay. Well, hey, we talk about, we usually have to go to Materials Corner, and we've been talking about, mining and et cetera, about ceramic materials. What's the geekiest ceramic geekdom that you have experienced lately?
I'm not sure whether that was one of those complimentary uses of the term geek.
Oh, it is. It totally
or
is.
Or the high school bully version.
No. Like
Kathy's not
totally
a bully.
Cool geek. Yeah.
Cool geek. Got it. Yeah, there is a website out there that was made by one of our friends, Del Harrow, and it's called Ceramic Materials Atlas. And no association, we are a Ceramic Materials Workshop and all our things, just a great combination of words. But Ceramic Materials Atlas is this really fascinating website, all just about our materials. And what Del, and he's been working with students and some of his peers at the university he works at, but they've really put together this cool website where they sort of tell the story of a lot of the materials that we all work with. And it's an ongoing project. He's constantly updating it and sort of adding things. But when you go there, you see these sort of collections of materials. There's a page on ball clays or barium or Custer feldspar or boron or chrome. And you click on anything and you really get these sort of amazing little profiles. You can follow the history of Custer feldspar, right? This one that we lost recently, and he's showing pictures of the grind house where they're grinding up the materials, and he shows the mine on Google Maps and literally where it is, and you can understand what it is, and he writes the history sort of the material, what it was being used for non-ceramic applications, the geologic survey of its area in South Dakota. It's really a fascinating document as to showing what all these things are and where they come from, and really put together in an interesting way. We like the hard science, but I was talking with Del about it, and he was saying, it's more poetic than hard science, but it's really great to give this perspective, because I think a lot of people are pretty detached as to where their materials are coming from. As what these things really are.
They come from a bag and the supply store. That's it. That's where I get
Santa.
mine. Material Santa. I like that.
A white bag of flint thrown over his shoulder.
I'd take some Custer feldspar
He
right now.
confused Custer and silica again. Ugh.
I asked for Grawling this year. No. But, I mean, where our materials come from is such a fascinating subject. As you were saying, Kathy, like we have materials corner, but really understanding that these materials are very, very specific chemistries, but that they come from all over the country. And now at this point, all over the world, not just here in the States, but I know a lot of our European students are getting materials from the States. We're getting European materials. We're getting materials from India and South America and Australia and New Zealand and Africa, and really sort of understanding what these deposits are and what it takes to get them to us. Like losing Custer is an interesting story because it as best as I have gotten the narrative, it's an economic story. It's a story of sort of manufacturing in America and mining. Boy, mining is such a subject that we don't talk about enough, and sort of our role in mining and how just makers get materials. And so I think that Ceramic Materials Atlas really does a beautiful job doing it.
Cool. Well, I will check that out. We have so many good questions queued up here. I want to jump right in. So y'all screw your brains and your skulls here. So our first one is going to be from Bo. And Bo has a great question about layering glazes or not.
Hi, Matt, Rose, and Kathy. My name is Bo Bratton, and I'm coming at you from Boise, Idaho. I have a piece where I layered 2 glazes on top of each other, and the results turned out beautiful. I would really like to replicate this, but I want to replicate it in just one glaze. Is it possible for me to take both glazes and mix the recipe of dry ingredients together to create just one glaze so that I can mimic what I have on the layered piece in just one glaze recipe? I have a feeling Lord Celsius, aka Matt the Bummer, is going to tell me no. And if that's so, I would like to understand why and what's going on and what would be the issues. Secondly, is another approach to trying to make one glaze out of these layered glazes, just mixing and matching different ingredients to try and get what I have on the layered piece. I didn't know if you guys had any other thoughts or if I just need to keep layering. Thank you for this podcast. I've learned so much. It's been so helpful. And all this knowledge has helped me just make beautiful work. Thank you guys, and I look forward to hearing from you.
That is such a great question. I mean, it's so, actually kind of simple but complex, and I don't think we've ever had this question. So, all right, Matt the Bummer and Rose the Absolute Delight, take it away.
Well, I'll let Matt be the bummer.
I know how you two work.
Yeah, he can.
Good
He
cop,
can.
bad cop,
Lord
yeah.
Celsius.
Story of my life. She makes me give the children all the bad news.
That's
No,
all.
so
that's
good
not
at
true. I have to take him to the doctors. You get
Yeah.
out of that.
Yeah, you get points.
All right. Well, I mean, Bo sort of already answered his question, so I don't really have to answer this one.
But why, Matt? Why?
Why?
Okay, so yeah, layering is a big deal, and I think it's a lot of people a way a lot of people get interested and excited about glazes, which we're always pro glaze excitement, because studio glazes tend to be on the boring side.
Ooh, shade thrown.
Mm-mm.
Well, no, studios pick their glazes because they're consistent and because they work really well. And oftentimes the more exciting reactions that we see in glazes come from a certain level of chemical chaos, and a studio doesn't want. How much chemical chaos are you willing to accept, Kathy?
I do not want any chemical chaos. Thank you for asking. I won't even allow an overlap board in my studio because that just like is a written invitation for trouble. So
I know, and even some of the commercial glaze companies are now advertising what their glazes look like layered, and to me, that's
their business. Yeah.
It's we'll say that's an interesting decision.
It'll be an uptick in customer service.
But yeah, Bo did answer the question already. Okay, Ray, short answer. I'm keeping it tight.
Try it
everybody.
for one time. Yeah. See how it feels.
Let's see if it works. Hold on. Let me start my timer. Okay, you got 10 seconds.
Okay, but I gotta set context.
Oh, yeah, failed it.
When you're layering a glaze, what you're doing is you're watching two separate chemistries dissolve into each other. Okay. And it does not work the same as mixing them all together. Now, where those two layers melting into each other would go eventually, once it's completely dissolved into each other and homogenized, would be that final result. But that's not what people are looking for when they're layering. They are looking for the process of layer A melting into layer B. And so that's the big problem. We had a student in our online classes, Rebecca Udermark, who did a great research project where she was at her university at the time, and they had, I think it was 36 different glazes, and she wanted to study layering. So she spent the entire summer, and literally what she did is layer glaze A over glaze B over glaze A, and then a perfect mix of the two of them. And then we analyzed the chemistry of all of them. And the short answer is, like, yes, the combined chemistry is the result of all of those things mixed together, and the chemical predictions are exactly what you would expect when you combine those into one like mega glaze. But the melting effects, that's what people are interested in, and that is an impartial chemical reaction. Whereas when you just mix it all together from the start, it's a complete chemical reaction, and so you don't get those levels of interest. And that really becomes that's the short version. How long was that? 5 minutes?
Yeah, well, that was pretty good, actually. I think of it almost in terms of like spraying a glaze over another glaze versus like dipping a glaze over another glaze. You know, sometimes like you wouldn't be able to get even that variation in just mixing the two together. It is the layered effect. Yeah.
Well, that melting into each other is a funny little chemical reaction because they really do melt as two separate glazes. Like, this is the way that I've taught about it ever since sort of doing this work with Rebecca, is you really have to think about them as two separate layers. And many of you who layer glazes know only certain glazes work on top, right? Or only certain glazes work underneath, because it's that the thought of them melting as separately and then submerging. You know, if you put a clear glossy glaze or even a glossy glaze that's blue or brown, that's not going to do anything as the top coat because it's formed its own independent layer, which is just the clear glossy glaze on top. And then as it submerges, you just see this sort of ugly merging together of those two layers. Whereas the glazes that are more interesting as a top layer are going to be things like a true matte glaze. True matte glazes tend to layer really well because a true matte glaze is a glossy glaze that crystallizes because of its chemistry. Well, when it crystallizes and then begins to submerge, you sort of get these floating islands of matte crystals suspended in the glass that it's submerging into, and it ends up spotty and non-homogeneous, which is what people are looking for. Whereas if you just mix together a matte glaze and a glossy glaze, their average chemistry is just a less glossy glaze. And so you don't get the islands and the melting. Or, some of the other tricks are putting an iron-bearing glaze underneath another glaze. Iron, we've talked about on the show before, iron has this behavior where past cone 4 iron breaks down and releases oxygen. We call it thermal decomposition. Well, that creates bubbles in a melting glaze, and those bubbles will swell and pop, and they'll often push the glaze underneath them aside. And then you will get these sort of
above
bubbles of dark bubble. Oh yeah, but the top layer gets pushed aside, and you get these sort of dark spots that have come through a white glaze or something like that. So you really have to pick specific types of glazes as to what goes on what. But yeah, they don't really work homogeneously. Are there plenty of effect glazes that are cool? Sure, absolutely. But it's not anything like wild or crazy that you're going to get from mixing them together.
Yeah, I don't know how studios do it with like those overlap boards, and I get tempted, but it's really tough. I mean, just to show a glaze on our test board where it's like one quick dip and one, slightly longer dip. I can't remember how many seconds we do. That's trouble right there.
Yep. But to that one though, I gotta say, oftentimes I have people like ask me like, why do my glazes run so much when I layer them? And people will assume that there's some like magic chemical reaction that happens when you layer these two glazes together. And the answer is no, there isn't. You're putting them on much thicker than you realize.
Right. Exactly.
And that is the real problem with layering. And that's why I would discourage anyone who runs a public studio from encouraging the layering, because what happens is people are really bad at estimating how thick their glaze layer's on. And that second glaze layer especially will tend to go on very thick, and it's going to run like crazy. And I know people like that effect as the glaze runs and moves into each other, but it's glaze
they
running
don't like
is a huge
scraping
problem.
shelves as much as that. So
You have a board of shame. You're not allowed to use a wheel until you grind shelves.
Oh, I wish. I mean, we just try and, get the instructors to focus on demonstrating accents, so to kind of fulfill that need, but to do it, just in small amounts, like something around the rim and, nothing doubled up, anywhere near the bottom of the piece. And I know, our studio, like a lot of studios, are now switching to firing on cookies. So, circles of really sturdy clay with some kiln wash on, just to try and keep things off of our shelves. So,
running is always a problem. It's always a huge problem. Like the test tiles that we use, our pro test tiles that we design, they literally have a motor in them because even we don't escape from running. Glazes run. That is part of it. It's a melting glass, and when that viscosity gets to a certain point, because it's thick or it's overfired, it's gonna move, and that thickness is generally the number one enemy of any time you're layering. So watch out on that rim dip, everybody. It's not as thin as you think it is.
Words to live by. So thank you, Bo, for that very brilliant question. And speaking of brilliant questions, our next one comes from somebody in my hometown, and their name is Kookie Kane. And Kookie has a question about Gillespie Borate substitutions. Hello, For Flux Sake. This is Kookie Kane from the Northeast U.S., and I love the show, especially Kathy and Rose. They're brilliant. Listen, I'm an extremely charming and somewhat good-looking director of a busy urban studio, and I have a question. We've taken glazes such as Cone 6 Kittens Clear and replaced the Gillespie Borate for Gillespie 1-to-1. Though it tests fine and looks good, after a week or two, the glaze turns to pudding and is insanely thick. Students who don't know any better glaze with it, and then it just falls off of the clay body during the firing onto my kiln shelves. My question is, why is it doing this? And should the replacement not be 1-to-1? Thanks again.
Hey, Kathy.
What a sexy voice.
Yeah, she sounds very interesting.
Hey, Kathy.
And demure.
Do you have any cousins that run a ceramic studio in the Northeast? Or?
That are rather good looking too.
I don't know. I haven't looked into it. Listen,
Wow.
a girl's got to get her answers however she needs to get her answers, and perhaps not abuse her role in a technical based podcast. You can appreciate that, right?
Yeah, leave us alone. All right,
Oh,
well,
yeah,
definitely Cookie.
yeah.
Oh, Gillespie Borate. Oh boy. So we gotta go. We gotta take a trip back. Gotta take a trip back.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, Cookie wanted a quick answer.
I really did. I mean, she really sounds like she did. Yeah.
Very efficient person, that Cookie. So Gillespie Borate is a material that is very common, especially in mid-temperature glazes. It's a source of boron. Boron is a material that helps glazes fire at temperatures under cone 10. So you see it very commonly in glazes under cone 10, cone 6, cone 04, not that much in cone 10, although it certainly can be there, because boron is a lower temperature glass former than silica, which is what does most of our glass forming. Gillespie Borate is a material that went off the market in the late 90s and was no longer available for sale. That mine has been closed since the 90s, but somewhere in the early 2000s, Laguna, the ceramic supply store in Southern California, discovered that there was a large deposit of mined but not processed Gillespie Borate. They bought it, had it ground and bagged up, and they had been selling it for the last 10 plus years. That deposit has now run out. And like I said, that was all mined back in the 90s. So now the Gillespie is gone, for real gone. There's still plenty of it in that mountainside, but that's a whole mining question. That's a longer story. So back when Gillespie Borate originally disappeared, which was in the late 90s, there were a lot of substitutes that people were selling. Gillespie Borate, which is from Hamel & Gillespie, which is a material supplier on the East Coast, sold one of these substitutes. There's a ton of those substitutes out there. Laguna at the time had their own that they called Laguna Borate, Gillespie Borate, Caddy Cal, different Fritz. Everybody had their different thing. Gillespie had sort of taken over as the most popular version of a Gillespie Borate substitute. And the big problem, honestly, the reason why you're all stuck listening to us today is because when I started getting into research in the late 90s, the first big research project I did was about the chemistry of Gillespie Borate and why people were really bad at making substitutions of these other materials. Because true. it was chaos. Like the late 90s when Gillespie Borate disappeared, everyone lost their freaking minds. Yeah. But all the chemistry was crazy. And I would read all these articles. I'd be like, these don't make any sense. Let's figure out what actually is going on. And that sort of led to my life of glaze chemistry and deviancy that I lead today.
Thank you, Gillespie Borate. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much.
So Gillespie, the short answer is we don't actually know what's in Gillespie Borate. These companies are pretty cagey about what's in any of these materials. They are so cagey, not to get too gossipy, but a little while back, I was in an email conversation with the owner of Hamel & Gillespie, and we were just talking and generally going back and forth, and we traded a dozen emails at that point. And then I just happened to say, hey, by the way, I don't have a chemical analysis on Gillespie Borate that is verified. Do you have one that you can share with me? The email conversation stopped.
Really?
I have not heard from them since. Literally didn't respond. Nothing.
Right. So when someone asks, like, should I, perhaps, it's, well, shockingly, we're having the same problem at Harvard Ceramics, but
oh my gosh, really?
I know.
That must be hard on you.
But, the question is
Cookie
like,
a student?
I don't think so. But when people ask, like, should we not have substituted one for one? I guess that's all we had to go by. And now we're just seeing what the results of that is and asking how to adjust it. Yep.
So I have to point out something that I find rather interesting. I just went to Hamel & Gillespie's website, and Gillespie Borate is trademarked name.
Oh yeah, they want They want to claim the ownership of it. They want it to be
That's
their
very
thing.
interesting.
Yeah. Is it a one-to-one substitute? No, it absolutely is not. What I suspect, I don't know this for a fact, because like I said, they're not giving out answers, and they really like to sit on mystery because it gives them power in the marketplace of, and Rose used to have this back in the tile days, that the frit companies would never give you.
No, they never give you. They'll tell you what's in it, but they won't give you the chemistry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or there was the one they would send the representative.
To come do it for you because they didn't want to give out the chemistry.
Oh, well,
yeah.
I would take that. I'd pay for that. Damn.
Oh, yeah. They used to come and like on a schedule. They'd show up, come for a week, do the work, and then leave. It was kind of great.
Well, what do you think? What do you think is turning it into pudding? Like, why does it test perfectly fine? It's great for a couple of weeks, and then it's like literally pudding.
Well, we have to go back into what the material is. And Hamill,
Cookie, sit down. It's going to be a while.
Thank goodness you're listening to this, Cookie, and you can double time my voice. Unlike people listening to me in real time.
Oh,
you can 2x speed me.
God, I hadn't even thought about that.
So Hamill Gillespie, they're a retailer, but what's interesting about them is that they are really an importation company. And for what I know, they have the importation rights in the U.S. from a huge mining company, one of the biggest mining companies in the world, called Imerys. And so they're really bringing in a lot of Imerys materials internationally. And Imerys has got a pretty big footprint in Europe. What I suspect Gillespie Borate is colemanite. And colemanite, there are huge colemanite deposits in Turkey. And it's a lot of what the Europeans listening to this will know as a boron source, because they wouldn't have Gillespie Borate. And so I suspect it's colemanite. It may be cut with other things. I may be completely wrong. It may be another mineral called ulixite.
On their website, they say a 1-to-1 replacement for Gillespie Borate. Do you think they're taking colemanite and ulixite together?
Well, so that goes back to what Gillespie is. Gillespie Borate in and of itself was this deposit in Southern California where naturally forming was this one borate mineral called colemanite, a second borate mineral called ulixite, and then unnaturally occurring bentonite. And those of you who've worked with Gillespie Borate, the original, will know oftentimes you don't need to add in kaolin to Gillespie Borate glazes, and they'll still stay suspended, because kaolin's usually what keeps our glazes suspended. And that's because of the bentonite in the Gillespie Borate would help to keep the glaze suspended. But Gillespie Borate would also turn glazes to jelly. Maybe not this bad, but it certainly would. It's very interesting. We've talked to some friends who've had these problems before. My first piece of advice would be to try to add in a dispersant like Darvan or sodium silicate, but I have been told that it's not working with the Gillespie Borate, which is a bit of a problem.
No.
And so that might not do it. A couple of other things that we've definitely talked with our friends in Europe about some of the quirks about colemanite, and this is just for Cookie to try. I can't say whether this will actually work, but I know that colemanite has some problems that people have solved by calcining it. Calcining is not the easiest process, but it's not hard. You want to throw a big bowl, like as big as you can, fire that up as high as you can. Don't glaze it. But then you take that bowl and you fill it about halfway full. Do not fill it all the way. Fill it about halfway full with whatever material you're trying to calcine, and then fire it up to cone 015. Do not fire it any hotter than that, or it will start to melt and then it'll just become a rock. But that will burn out any materials that can become problematic. It's a hell of a step to take, but unfortunately, with the colemanite, you really only have with the Gillespie, you only have a couple of options. One, you can just keep increasing water content, which is not going to solve the problem.
No,
right.
Like I've been told, Darvan doesn't solve the problem. I've asked my friend who also mentioned this, who's not Kathy King, actually not Kathy, about trying sodium silicate. That was Rose's idea, which I thought was a good idea. It may not solve the problem because Darvan.
But you know what? There in the tile factory I used to work at, we added sodium hexametaphosphate, which is we call it SHMP for short. And that always dispersed our glaze way better than sodium silicate or Darvan. And it was like a little drop will do ya. And it was like beautiful after that. It doesn't last very long, for age wise, but it really worked. And you add it because you can buy it. It's a food additive. And you could buy it in crystal form, and then you just add it in a concentrated liquid form, and it does wonders.
Well, I
So I
might
wonder
try
if that'll
that.
work.
Yeah, because we've tried the Darvan and sodium silicate, and Casey in our studios have been going back and forth on that. But what kind of world are we living in that I've got to have? We have a wonderful staff person, Diane, who checks all of the buckets every morning. That's crazy.
Oh my gosh! Try SHMP. I'd be interested to hear if it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to reach out to Cookie on another day and see if she's taken any of the sage advice. But
See, maybe you'll run into her at the
I don't
studio.
know. I mean, it's a good chance. I mean, we're
She's
in the same town.
Northeast.
I know. Well, that is all the time we have today, my friends. So until next time, Matt and Rose.
See you later, Kathy.
Bye, Cookie.
Ah, drats. Well, folks, that's it for this week's episode of For Flux Sake. I'd like to thank the listeners who submitted questions this week. And if you want your question answered on the show, shoot us an email at ForFluxSakePodcast@gmail.com. So join us next time, and when in your studio, remember what Rose always says.
Always remember to test, test, test. This is a test of the emergency glaze system.